of my favorite primary races shaping up this summer is in the state of New York. They've redrawn their district maps, and there is a now 12th congressional district. It incorporates parts of Manhattan, the Upper West Side, the Upper East Side, some other parts, but it pits two sitting members of Congress, two Democrats, Carolyn Maloney and Jerry Nadler, against each other, along with a few other challengers, including our guest, Suraj Patel. He calls himself a pragmatic progressive, which may or may not be smart politics, but we'll talk about that in just a sec. Suraj, thanks for being on the show. We appreciate it.
Thanks, David. Thanks for having me.
So it must, first of all, it must be daunting to think you're going up not against just one Democratic incumbent, but two.
Yeah, I mean, it isn't at all, in that I've done this race before against one of these two. 2 years ago, we came within 3% of unseating Carolyn Maloney in what was one of the closest primary elections in the country. And this cycle, we learned from the New York Times earlier in the year that Maloney engineered to cut young and progressive voters and Latino voters out of her district. And she made a deal in which she absorbed more of Jerry Nadler's district to save her reelection, because these folks don't try to go after young voters. They simply try to silence them. And what we have now in front of us is a comeuppance. It's a race that the Supreme Court of New York tossed out their maps because they saw that gerrymandering and incumbency protection, and they redrew them themselves. And these lines now pit two longtime incumbents, 60 years of time in Congress, against one another and me.
And a big difference is both of them, I believe, take corporate PAC money and you don't.
That's the single biggest difference, I would say, between the three of us, other than obviously generational differences. But both of them take corporate PAC money, and not just small amount, but majorities of their intake is corporate PAC money. In fact, Maloney and Nadler combined have taken $120,000 from BlackRock since 2009. We just learned that BlackRock is the single largest shareholder of four of the largest gun manufacturers in the country. So this isn't just an academic thing. It's not just a message thing. It is a fundamental question of who are our representatives representing, and why have we not gotten progress in Washington on fundamental issues?
And do you believe it's because of this sort of establishment stuff that runs through their veins, that because there are limits to how far they're willing to go on particular issues?
Absolutely. I mean, look at that. Since 1973, our generation is going to have less reproductive rights, less gun control, less union rights, a series of things that have eroded in the 30 times 2, 60-year career of Nadler and Maloney. And why would we trust them in year 61 to do anything different? We've fundamentally lost the argument across the country on a variety of issues and lost the trust of the American people to govern them. It's going to take a decade or more to gain these rights back at the least. And that's a fight I'm willing to be in. I have the energy and the vigor and the ideas to be part of that debate. I think what we're seeing from them is aristocracy. It is this idea they're entitled to this seat, redo their districts, take corporate money, and are now having a public food fight about who gets more credit, frankly, David, for the current state of the economy, the country, and the party. And they can have that debate. They're welcome to have that debate, because I don't think any of us are really happy with it.
What are you seeing in the poll numbers to have sort of the two Democratic establishment in the race? I imagine there's a hope that they sort of split some of the vote. Are you seeing much of an opportunity for you based on the numbers so far, with the understanding the primary, of course, isn't until August?
Yeah, so the top of the segment you mentioned, opponents. So there, it is a three-way race now, and we've got in this race two incumbents fighting over the sort of same pot of voters, just as you surmised. And there is a place right down the middle of this district to pick up voters who are disenchanted, disillusioned, and angry with the lack of progress on a variety of issues we promised to have made progress on. We all knocked on doors and made millions of phone calls and got Democratic majorities in the House, Senate, and White House. And we have seen a regression on a number of things like child care or child tax credit or gun control or you name it. And it feels like we're being governed by the other party, when in reality, we're the ones in power. So I think if you think about the frustrations out there across the city and country, there's a massive swath of the electorate that is ready for someone new. I can tell you, I just received our polling back. 57% of this electorate prefers somebody new with fresh ideas and energy over someone with seniority and experience. Now, two candidates are fighting over that other 43%, and one candidate is representing a different path forward.
And that different path forward, you describe yourself as a pragmatic progressive. What does that mean?
So look, when I started my political career, it was to work for President Obama in 2007 and 8. At that time, if you recall, we had Democratic senators from Kansas, from Missouri, from Alaska, from Arkansas, from North Dakota. And it's not even surmisable right now in our current state of the party to make that case. And the reason is this. We used to be versed in the art of persuasion, that we are not just demonizing people we disagree with. We are trying to come up with ways to bring them to our side on climate change, on immigration, on civil rights, on gun control. It's clear we're going to have to win people back. With the issue, for example, of reproductive rights, 69% of Americans support Roe versus Wade. And yet 20% of that same group voted for Donald Trump, which means we're losing them on things like taxation and inequality and the number of issues I mentioned. To be comprehensive about those and to win these people back is how we get some of these rights back. And that's the pragmatism part here. It's about being practical and making a new case for the same values.
There has been an argument that the pragmatism for you, some of your critics would say, well, it has to do with Israel, that unlike a lot of other progressives, you are very staunchly supportive of Israel's right to exist, providing military equipment. And there's some people who suggest, well, this is just Suraj who is pandering to constituents in his district. What's your reaction to that?
My reaction to that is very simple. And on the one hand, in this race, you've got Carolyn Maloney, who has been a full APAC staunch supporter of the state of Israel, and you've got Jerry Nadler in the same way. And here you've got a third opportunity to select somebody who, who supports and has consistently supported a two-state solution, has consistently supported the right to Palestinian statehood, living alongside Israeli statehood. And the question is, can you elect people who are willing to build those bridges and get to our goals? And that is what I'm trying to do here. But of course, this is not a pander in any way. In 2001, when I was a student at Stanford University, I signed a public letter denouncing sort of anti-Semitism and BDS and things like that. So by no means have I sort of switched on this positioning. And just because my district has changed doesn't mean I plan to switch on that positioning at all.
About the district, I always sort of imagined when I was living on the Upper West Side of Manhattan that if you're ever running for public office, easier to do it in some ways in Manhattan, where you just go door to door to door to door in apartment buildings or wait outside subway stops and you can literally shake 10,000 hands in a day. Is that really the case? Is it like that? Or is there more sort of precision work that has to be done?
I mean, we are doing that every single day. We are the only campaign out there with the energy and the youthfulness and the excitement in this race to be out every single day in the morning and in the evenings at farmers markets on the weekends and street fairs. And so that is a fundamental major part of our strategy, which is to remind people there's an election. It's an August 23rd primary. It will probably be a very low turnout affair because no one has ever had an August primary in New York. And many of you who, like yourself, who lived in New York knows that in August, right before Labor Day, this island empties out with people going on vacation. And so we know there's a fundamental issue here of educating voters about the primary and getting them to request absentee ballots. So we do that. But David, there's also obviously a precision targeting that's required when you have a district that probably, in its population, like every district in the state of New York, has to be about 777,000 people. But during the day, my district probably swells to 7 million people. This includes all of Midtown. And so you've got to be a little smart about making sure you're not hitting this massive number of people who are here, who go vote, in New Jersey or Connecticut or wherever they live.
There does seem to be a natural disadvantage, obviously, in terms of the politicking in this race if you're not taking corporate money, because that's less money that you can bring in. You're in one of perhaps the most expensive media market in the United States. So do you have to spend a ton of your time? I mean, just trying to ask for small dollar donations or asking just ordinary people for donations as opposed to, others who can simply rely on their corporate PACs to send the message for them?
Yeah, but I mean, there's this fundamental reason that, I teach business ethics at NYU. I do not believe you should take money from the very same companies you're supposed to regulate. And when people donate to a campaign, and unfortunately in this system, we have to have money, and I'm a full supporter of public funding for political campaigns. But in this current reality, we have to have money. But when people donate to my campaign, they're donating for representation, they're donating for hope, they're donating as a protest to the incumbents. There's a variety of reasons they have. When a corporation donates to a campaign, there's only one motive, and that is return on investment. And you should ask yourself why our political system is so skewed towards massive corporate interests that have taken over our economy at the expense of small business and workers and immigrants and people like that. And the reason is very simply because you follow the money trail, and it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that our government's been captured by special interests that now wholeheartedly fund campaigns.
One policy question before I let you go. There's a proposal in terms of guns. Given that Democrats don't have the Republican support, there's a proposal by a Virginia congressman to try to use reconciliation. In other words, tax AR-15s by like 10,000% to make them so expensive that an 18-year-old, 19-year-old can't actually go out with their own money and buy them because they can't afford them. Republicans are crying foul, saying, no, you can't do something like this through reconciliation, although I think you can. Is that the kind of alternative you would support?
I would absolutely support that alternative. And let's not get lectures from Republicans about what is fair grounds and what is not. They stole 2 Supreme Court seats. So no, I don't want to get bleeped in this. So, but on the other side of this, I think there's a lot of things we need to be doing to educate the American public on the gun issue. For example, I think people would be appalled to know that in 2005, the gun industry got a bill passed by George W. Bush and Republicans that shields it from every type of liability for the torts caused by the use of their products. Now, not tobacco, not the National Football League, not Coca-Cola. Literally no industry in America has that kind of blanket legal protection. Why? And we should explain that to people because it's not even a fair playing field.
The liability issue is another amazing one. Airlines are required to carry liability. Why can't gun manufacturers as well?
My campaign has to carry liability.
Yeah.
My campaign for 6 months has to carry liability and workman's comp and all those things. But somehow Smith & Wesson do not, as they target people with AR-15 ads that are predilected to this kind of behavior, young males around 18 years of age. Come on.
Suraj Patel, he is a candidate for the 12th Congressional District in the Democratic primary in August in New York. Suraj, good luck to you, and thanks so much for coming on the conversation. We appreciate it.
Thanks, David.